Gimel Lamed Aleph. Elu hein shtuki kosher. The Mishnah says, what's a shtuki? Which means a person knows who his mother is, but we don't know who fathered the child. So when the child would say, is that my father? She would silence him. She would tell him to keep quiet for show's sake. Keep quiet. She would shush him. We're not sure of the parentage from the paternal side. Maybe his father was an incestuous relationship. Right? So now, the majority of men to this woman, she's a single woman, what kind of child would they produce? A kosher child. Right? Because ponei habo la pnuto, ever, anybody has relations with a single woman, a goy, even an eved, what's the halacha? The child's a kosher Jew. So the only reason you suspect the pedigree of the child to be illegitimate, who was the father? The father was what? Was an incestuous relationship. That's the basis to be concerned. That the child is a mamzer. Or maybe a mamzer had relations with her, right? So if a mamzer, we had early in the Mishnah, hakol holech achar apsul, achar apogum. The defect manifests itself based on whichever parent has that. Omer Rabo, Dvar Torah shtuki kosher. On a Torah level, this kind of child was permitted. He's a kosher Jew. My timer, what's the reason? Rov ksherim etzlo. Because the majority of men are permitted to her. When we say permitted, doesn't mean permitted. I mean, what about a goy and a eved? It's not permitted to her. But even in that context, so when we say rov ksherim, in terms of kshem regarding to produce the kosher child, umiyut psulam etzlo, and only a minority of what produce that illegitimate child. Who's that? The mamzer or the incest. So if that's the case, if you go after rov, there's no question the child is a kosher child. Achram lahatos. The azli inu legabo. And let's say the man who impregnated her, wherever he came from, his community, he came to her where she was, that's called a porish, meruba porish, right? The majority of the world do not produce illegitimacy with her, right? Even if it's a non-Jew, even if it's an Eved Kanani. So let's say they came to her. The question is, who came to her? Did her father, did her brother, would be incest? We say, well, the majority are kosher. So if that's the case, so therefore the child definitely should be kosher. So why do we say that the child is what? Is not permitted. Shtuki, we don't allow the shtuki to marry a kosher Jew. Rov tells us that the child is a kosher Jew. The father produced a kosher child. My Amrit, because what are you going to say? Dilma ozli legabayu. The Mishnah says we Ezra did with 10 groupings. Shtuki was one of them. We don't allow a shtuki to marry a regular. No. If they're definitely illegitimate, there's no question. But we're saying shtuki, where we don't know the pedigree on the paternal side, we don't allow that child to marry a kosher Jew. We want to know why. The majority of people regarding this child are what? Produce a kosher child. So what's the problem? So the answer is, because you can be concerned, maybe she went to him. So if she went to the person, Dilma ozli legabayu. The woman went to have relations where the man was. What is that? Havali kavua. Kavua k'merza merza domi. Right? It's kavua. The case we spoke about. Person buy, you have 10 shops, 9 non-kosher, 9 kosher, 1 non-kosher. You buy meat in one of the shops, and now you're not sure which shop you're in. Although probability speaking, you have 9 to 1 is gzersa kosuv. Since your question begins where the location of the problem is, what do we say? We don't go after rov. So if the man had come to her, that means he had left his location. That's like finding meat on the street, right? You find meat on the street. And my question is, there you go with the probability. It's 9 to 1. The meat is kosher meat. So who impregnated her, came to her and had relations with her? That's like 9 to 1. That's called the porish meruba porish. You go after majority. But there's a possibility maybe he had gone to her, right? If that's the case, that's called kavua k'merza merza domi. She went to him. So if that's the case, it's a suffix, but still, But the Rishonim speak out, but it's like a Svek Sveka. I have a question. Maybe he came to her. If he came to her, then it's not a question, correct? And even if she came to him, so it's a suffix. So it's a 2-to-1 that the child's a kosher child. Because even if it's a suffix, it's not definitely an incestuous relationship. It may have been what? It may have been a kosher Jew who had relations with her. Good, it's Xeris HaKosov. It's Xeris HaKosov. Doesn't make no. There's no logic. No, there's Xeris HaKosov that if it's not the kavua, if he came to her, Torah says although probability is not 100%, it's only probability. Torah says you have a right to deal with it like it's 100%. No, if he came to her, that's like finding meat in the street. Although it's only probably it's a kosher Jew. Wait. So the Torah says when it's probably, the child's definitely kosher. Definitely kosher. But she went to him. So
Probably too.
No, but the Torah says you don't go probably, but still you deal with it like a suffix. It's a 50-50. That's called kemechza mechza. We deal with it like it's a 50-50. It means the Xeris HaKosov of Rove does not apply in that situation.
Why is that 50-50? Is that because of Xeris HaKosov?
Xeris HaKosov.
That's why it's 50-50.
Right.
Looking at it face value, it's a Rove as well.
No, it doesn't make. But probability means it's probably okay, but it's not. When we say 50-50, it doesn't mean 50-50. It means we deal with it like a 50-50. A 50-50, there's not a question, what is it? You have no right to deal with it leniently, correct? What about if it's a 90-10? But the Torah, let's say the Torah there was never a Xeris HaKosov of a Rove. Torah says you never have a right to rely on probability. So there's no 90-10, 50-50, it's the same thing. So we call kavua, kemechza mechza, what it means is that 90 to 10 is no different than 50-50. As 50-50 is not a question, we would not deal with it leniently. Only because the Xeris HaKosov was only said in a specific context, not in the other context. That's the reason. Okay? Wait a second, I just want to make this clear. So we have a question. How did this woman become impregnated? Did the man come to her? If the man came to her, that means the child she's carrying is definitely kosher. Because Rove says the majority of people do not produce illegitimacy with her. But there's a chance maybe she went to them. And if she went to them, although the majority of the world would not produce illegitimacy, but the Xeris HaKosov of Rove was not said. So I have a question, who is the father? It may be illegitimate. So it's unresolved. We don't know what happened, correct? So if we don't know what happened, so what is it? I look at it. It's possible the man may have come to her. If the man may have come to her, what is the child? Kosher. And even if she went to the man, it's possible that the man who impregnated her may be a kosher Jew. So it's a svek sveka. Right? No, it's the same reality. It's the same. When I evaluate the question here. No. The case, the Gemara Ksubis. No, the Gemara Ksubis. A woman, you have kiddushin on a woman who's married after she's 3 years old. The father marries her off. And now he consummates the marriage, she's 12 years old. She's 12. She's an adult. Right? Father marries her off when she's 11. So if the concept of adultery has no relevance to a minor. Correct? So she's definitely permitted to the husband, even if she agreed, she consented to have relations with another man because she's a minor. Now the man consummates the marriage, she's 12 years old. He finds her not to be a virgin. Right? So the question is, maybe she committed adultery? Is she permitted to her husband? Right? How did she lose her virginity? So the question is like this. Maybe she already lost her virginity even before she married him. And even if it happened afterwards, maybe she was raped. Right? Firstly, she may have lost it before she was married. And even if it happened after she was married, maybe she was raped. Therefore, she's permitted to the husband. Because I have a 2-to-1 saying that the reason why she doesn't have her virginity is in a context that she's permitted to the husband. That's the svek sveka. That's the way most Rishonim learns the concept of spek speaker. The probabilities. No, it's still a 2 to still a 2 to 1. It's the way you look. No. It's the probability of how to look at it. Let's talk about our situation. Let's say he may have come to her, she may have come to him. If she came to him, it would not be a problem. Right? If he came to her, it's not a problem. And even if she came to her, she went to him, it also may not be a problem. Because it may have been a kosher Jew she had relations with. So what's the chance of not? Because maybe it was a mamzer or incestuous. So that's a 2 to 1. The probability tells me probably the child is a kosher child. Because you have a 2 to 1 saying that the man who impregnated her wasn't an illegitimate Jew.
We don't know whether she came to him or he
Doesn't
came
mean, but
to
good. But we're looking,
That's
that would be a spek sveika. So in either case, the child should be 100% kosher. Right? So why are we giving this stringency and saying a shtuki, which is illegitimate?
So we don't know.
We don't. That's what we're dealing with over here. Rules of Suffolk, it should be permitted. So I saw an interesting ayla, which they speak about the Achronim. When we say kol kavor kemerza merza, the classical example I mentioned Friday was you have 9 Jews in the group and 1 goy in that group. Somebody takes a stone, throws it into the group. The stone definitely will kill one of the people. And before he throws it into the group, he's forewarned. You realize dropping that stone into that group, you're going to be killing a person. And 9 to 1 are Jews, so you're probably going to kill a Jew. And he throws. It's witnessed. The halacha is he's not liable he's not considered a murderer, that he killed a Jew. Since there is a non-Jew in that kavua, that's kavua. There's a non-Jew in the group. Even though probability it's 9 to 1 that the person he's going to kill is a Jew, not the non-Jew, but since factually there is the kavua, there is that one non-Jew there among the group, the Torah says you look at this as not as definitely it's going to kill a Jew, but it's a question. It's a suffix. That's the Gemara. That's the Gemara Ksubas. Okay, that's kol kavur kamerza merza. So now there's a question when we say kol kavur kamerza merza. When we say merza, does it mean it's 50-50? Or do it mean it's not definite? It's probably. To be liable for the death penalty, you have to definitely kill a Jew. So if we'd be able to go after Rove, and Torah says when you have 9 to 1, you deal with that as a definite. The act is an act of murder, killing a Jew. But if Torah says there is the exercise of Rove, because this kavua, because you have that non-Jew in the group, so for probably killing, sufficient to be liable for the death penalty. One way to look at it. So it's not 50-50, as I explained. Probably is the equivalent of 50-50. Or do we say no? It is 50-50. When we say kol, so it means 50. What does that mean? So the way to look on the way. We discussed the case, milk from an animal. An animal just, or maybe the animal, milk you drink is what? From a treifel. And you're not permitted to drink the milk of a treifel. Right? How are you permitted to drink the milk? The answer is because rov behemoths ksheros. The majority of cows are not defective. Therefore, the milk is kosher. In that case over there, is that a kavur or not a kavur? Kavur means if you have a herd of cows, and one cow among that herd would have a perforated lung, and now you want to milk one of them, you can't drink milk of any of that group. That because that one defective cow was in the group, right? The other case, maybe this cow's defective. So I don't have the problem is not within the group here. You're asking me a question. So since the majority of cows in the group are not defective, there's no reason why I have to be concerned. So there, because the kavua, the problem is not in the group, therefore you go after rov. Okay, that's how you differentiate between the two cases. So what is kavua? When the problem exists within the group, what does that mean? It takes on an identity. The question is, what is the value of that identity? Because it establishes itself, I deal with it like a 50%. It's like literally mechza mechza. It's already established itself. Or do we say no? It still remains it's probability. Probability means that's not enough to permit something. It's probably kosher. It's like I always say, you have a gun with 50 barrels in it, and you put one bullet in the barrel, in one of them, and you spin the barrel. Right? You say, well, you can pull the trigger because probably you're not going to blow your brains out. You understand? You're not pulling the trigger. Probably it's not definite. So if not for exerzkos of a rove, that rove is definite, it's probably kosher. Probably doesn't allow you to eat something. It has to be definitely kosher. Probability is not sufficient. Unless it's 100% kosher, it's not kosher. Exerzkos of rove is, even though you have 9-to-1 kosher stores, when you find meat on the street, 9-to-1, the Torah says, kol the porish, that meat is definitely kosher. When you find meat on the street, even though there's a chance it may have come from that non-kosher shop, doesn't make a difference. That's no, because you found the meat on the street. It's not you purchased it in the store. Doesn't make a difference. Since that's not kavua, where I found the meat, that's not called kavua. Okay, still a suffix. Either way, you're not going to be liable for the death penalty. So it doesn't make a difference. The question is, how do I understand it? Is it we treat it like a 50-50, or it's like we said, it's only a problem? It's just a way to understand it. I just bring out. Right. I just want to. We had a case. There's an interesting run in the Dorim. It's practical. There's a discussion in Gemara in the Dorim. The Gemara says that you have a river. So the Torah says that if something is a mayon, it has an underground source of water, a spring. Meaning what applies to water is not rainwater, but it's a natural spring, like a river. Not a man-made river, but a natural river. So the halacha is, what is the characteristic of a river or of a wellspring? It floats, there's movement. It's called zochel, it flows. What is the characteristic of a mikvah? What does it mean? Yikabu, it's contained water. It's contained. Yikabu, let the water gather. If you have a mikvah, and the mikvah, let's say, has a leak in it, and as a result of that leak, the water flows out, it's not a valid mikvah, regardless of how much water you have in that mikvah. It's not valid. Because the Torah says, a mikvah to be effective, it has to be a mikvah, it has to be contained. If the water flows out, it's not valid. A mayon, a wellspring, has to what? Its natural characteristic, it flows. Like a river. Okay, now. What is the source of the water of a river? The underground feeder. Or a well. What is the source of the water of a mikveh? Rainwater. It's called notfim. It drips. Dripping water. Drips means from the sky. That's rain. So the halacha is that rainwater are only effective if it's ashboren, if it's contained. If it's contained. River water, it's only because the source around spring. We have a problem. What about in the winter? At the end of winter, you had a rainy winter, and you have more rainwater in the river than spring water. Could you be tovel in there? Because rainwater could only be effective, only purified. So are you permitted to be tovel in a mikveh, in a river, at the end of the winter? Okay? So the Rishonim make a differentiation. They make a differentiation. That you have where the river originally flowed, 1,000 feet. That's its normal flow. After the winter, it's 3,000 feet wide because of the melting of the snow and the rainwater and everything. It's much wider. So most Rishonim, that's the way we rule halacha. The original path which the river flowed originally, even though you have more rainwater than river water, that there you could be tovel. But off to the side where the river water, that wasn't its path, because it broadened, there you cannot be tovel. Okay? Because you have more rainwater than river water. And that's the way it's ruled in Shulchan Aruch. Right? What's the rationale? This comes up very often. Let's say you're in the country, and you want to be told something. You go and you mind there's a spring, there's a brook. Now that brook, what is that brook? That brook is really it's from the snow melting in the mountains. So that water is rainwater. So you can't be told on that, unless if it's flowing. You can't put a metal vessel in there, or you want to be told something. You can't be tovel in there because it's not, because since it's rainwater only is effective if it's contained. Since it's flowing, it's not effective whatsoever. Okay? Well, let's say you have a lake. Same thing. A lake, right you go up to the country for Pesach. Normally, you're there in the summer. You know exactly how large the lake is, and it's not a man-made lake. And because of the winter rains and the snow, it's a lot wider. And you want to go be told with something at the edge of the lake. You can't be told with there. You have to take it and throw it out to the center of the lake, where that lake normally, that's its parameters. Only there is considered a valid tefillah. But along the edge, it's not considered a valid tefillah. But what's the rationale? So the rationale is, the Rambam even says even a greater chiddush, which the Ran cites the Rambam. You have a well, and the water comes out of the well and flows outward. So the Rambam says where the well itself is, in the ground, when the rains there, even if you have more rainwater than well water, since that's its location, you permitted, it retains its characteristics of the well. When it flows out of the well, since that's the location of the well, then it depends on majority versus minority. Then you have to have the majority of the water has to be well water and not rainwater. So what's the rationale? Same thing. Because what is the concept of bittul barov? What's the concept of majority versus minority? It's subsumed. Because of the value of the majority, it subsumes the minority. The Rambam, or the way we're saying, the normal path of the river, which it normally flows, because of the reality of what it is, it's based on quantity. It's just the reality of what the river is. Being a river, the river, even volume-wise, you may have more water, the river subsumes because that's its normal path. Once you go out of its normal path, then we talk about volume. Is the volume of rainwater more or less? Then it would be majority versus minority. But if we're dealing with actually the flow of water flowed, then it depends on what is the identity of that location. Is that called the original river, or that's called something else, the expansion of the river? And that's the Rambam. If it rains directly into the well location where the well is, that's the well. So even if you have more rainwater, it's irrelevant. Because being the well cannot be subsumed. Because that's its identity. The water that flows out of the well, so now we're talking about the derivative of the well. Now the question is the majority well water, spring water, or is it rainwater? There we deal with majority versus minority. So I'm saying something similar here. When you have kavua, if you hold that it's majority, but again, you can't rely on majority unless you have the exeris kosva barov, right? We say if it's kavua, we don't say the exeris kosva barov. It's only probability. Okay, that's easy. The other one says no. Where something is kavua, the problem existing there takes on an identity. Once it has that identity, you can't ignore that identity. So therefore, ratios have no relevance anymore. Ratio is irrelevant because it's taken on its identity. Because the Isser is factually, it's there in its location. It will be similar to this kind of svara that we're saying right now. You wanted to ask something? Yeah. Because you don't look at all the cows in Texas as one group. Let's say you have them all corralled. You have a farmer. Yeah, it's 10,000 acres. And they're all, he says, all my cows are contained within these 10,000 acres. And they're all corralled. They're all fenced in. And one of those cows is defective. So because the way you perceive it, those cows is one herd. It happens to be a herd which spreads over 10,000 acres. Then one of them is defective. You can't drink milk of any of those cows. The Gemara speaks in it's a Mishnah in Zvachim. The halacha is if you have a chatos, a sin offering, and a person consecrates a sin offering, and then afterwards he dies before it's brought. So these halacha that animal has to be discarded, has to be destroyed. You cannot use that animal. No, because the person is not alive anymore. Right? So that's Atosh Meis Baleo. And now you have a Beis HaMikdash. Let's say the man was alive, and you had the man brought his chatos to the Beis HaMikdash. So the Kohen, he took his chatos among many other chatos. Hundreds of other people sent their animals. So you have hundreds of chatos. The Kohen gets a message. Chaim Yankel died. And his chatos is among all those chatos. Yemusu kulam. They all have to die. They're all, why? Because that's kavua. The Gemara asked, why did you go after Rove? Because it's kavua. Since Balichaim Chashiv Lo Beteli, a living entity, has a certain value, innate value, it's not subsumed by majority. Same idea. A human being cannot be. That's the case in Ksubis. When you throw the stone, see, but the difference is there it's rabbinical. By an animal, see, the human being knows who he is. The person knows who he is. That's what it's explained. We don't know who he is, but he knows who he is. By the animal is not. The Gemara says that's only rabbinical. That's a rabbinical concept.
You know that he's Jewish. You know he's Jewish.
No, tell me what he knows. One of the people in the group is not Jew. We can't identify it. And you kill one of them. Let's say they all go away afterwards. So you're not able to identify the one who was killed whether he's a Jew or not Jew. But you know fractionally one of them was a non-Jew. Even though initially you have 9 to 1, the person's not liable for the death penalty. Okay? It's not a problem. Because that's regular bittul barov. Let's say it's something definitely not kosher. There's something definitely not kosher. And that not kosher intermingles with something else. Right.
The general question says, every time you apply rope, it starts over. You have a large pot, you pour a cup of water, a cup of some paper, and you apply rope, you pour another.
No. It's a good question. No, it's a good question. It's a good question. It's a good question. No, it's a good question. Good question. Let's say you have basam chola. If you have 60 to 1, a drop of the milk falls into meat, 60 to 1. So we say it's subsumed. Right? So that means that milk, now what do you look at it? That's considered like parva milk. Because it's subsumed by the meat. Let's now you have another droplet. Falls in. So now the new droplet isn't subsumed because the original droplet was subsumed. But factually, when you can eat that meat, you're going to taste milk in the meat. That's called chosamanir. It's reactivated. It's a different concept. You understand? Something that you can't identify. The whole idea. When do we say bittul barov? If something is an irresolvable situation, we say bittul barov. It's subsumed. But let's say able to taste the milk in the meat. The only reason why you permit it is because it's subsumed. Because it can't be identified. But if we say tamkik, and when you taste it, taste is a reality. That means you're identifying it. So if that's the case, you can't eat it any longer. That's called, it's being reactivated. It's called reawakened. Chosev v'nir. If it's reawakened, then there's a problem. So it's interesting. Tosas asked this question in Makapa. When you have rain, every time it rains into the river, that rainwater should be subsumed by the river water. Right? So the question is, we say kama bottle. Every raindrop that comes in should be subsumed. That's Tosas' question. So Tosas answers like this is interesting. What happens if you take a pitcher and you pour it into something volume in the pitcher is more than what you're pouring into. But you pour it slowly. Slowly. So as it goes in, do we say it's subsumed and eventually everything's subsumed? Or do we say since it's continuous pouring, you look at it as if it all came at one time? So the Gemara, based on the Gemara, we say it all came at the same time. Since originally when it started to flow, it flowed that ultimately it was all going in, we look at it as all it came in at one time. Therefore, we don't say as it intermingles, it's subsumed. So Tosa says a chiddush. During the winter season, it's meant to rain. Even though it rains on, there are pauses between one day and the next day, but since it rains continuously throughout the winter season, I look at all the rain of the winter as if it all came into the river at the same time. As if that's what Tosa's answers. Otherwise, the whole issue is never an issue. If it rains one day and then the next day it doesn't rain, that rain's already subsumed. No. You look at the whole season as if it's continuously raining. So originally it was all meant to come into the river at one time. Therefore, that's the reason why it's not subsumed. Okay. There's a question if that's the right to Drabonon. It's not. It's Drabonon. It's Drabonon. First of all, we don't look. Because the Gemara asks, how do you, according to the man, how do you eat meat? It's not. How do you bring the korban pesach? Right? There's always this issue over here. Right. Right. Kosher. So what's your question? Let's say you go into a store, and then when you leave the store, you don't recall whether you bought it at the kosher shop or the not kosher shop. What is your question there? Which shop did I buy the meat? Right? That's the origin. The stores themselves are not subsumed, because the stores can be identified. You have the kosher store, and you have non-kosher, one non-kosher shop. So what my question is what? It's the location of the shop. It's not the meat. So that's, you can't go after rope, because that's the mokum kavua, because that's the location where the problem starts. When you're dealing with the street, the question is, where did the meat come from? So it's already removed. So you have 9 to 1. The Torah says you go after probability. It came from the 9 rather than from the 1. But if you're in the shop, what's my question? Which shop did I buy the meat? So the shop, it's among the shops. My question is where the shop lies. The shop itself could have been identified as the shop. That's called kavua. So there's a famous question which Tosfos and Chulin. I would speak bittul barov. You have a non-piece kosher piece of meat falls into 100 is a piece of meat, 60. The we say bittul barov. It's subsumed. So why do we say kavua kamer samer tzadami? That's Tosfos' question. Bittul barov. You have kavua. So what would you say? It's a good question. Tosfos' answer is very simple. He says, because sin cannot be identified, it's misapchadus ket. It comes immediately, it's converted to permission. By the case of the non-kosher shop, the butcher shop, that shop could be identified. I have a question, which shop? The non-Jew among the non-Jews, he knows who he is. We don't know who he is. So because he himself knows who he is, that he can't be subsumed. Right? When the non-kosher meat falls into the kosher meat, 6 knows. Therefore, immediately it's converted into kosher. Therefore, there's no kavod. No, because it has an identity. It's a rabbinical. With an animal, it's a rabbinical concept. Okay, let's just go a little further. No, unknowingly. No, not deliberately. Unknowingly. For all the shops were kosher. Let me give you an example. Okay? And I'm not. That's a defect in me. Somebody says, go to this certain neighborhood. All the shops, butcher shops are kosher. I go there, and then afterwards, I realize, I'm told afterwards, no, one of the shops was not kosher. And I can't identify which. I'm not permitted to eat that meat. Because my question, she shop, did I buy it at a kosher shop? When you speak, he understands it. Okay, we'll stop here. Kaddish.